The asteroid belt known as the Graveyard of the Gods was not a place for the faint of heart or indeed the sane. It was a swirling chaotic blender of rock, ice, and the shattered remnants of a civilization that had vanished 10 million years ago. To the ZYXX Collective and half a dozen other species in the sector, this was sacred ground. Every twisted girder and scorched hull plate floating in the void was a holy relic, a piece of the precursor body that had transcended this reality. To Captain Reni Silva, it was just a really dangerous junkyard that paid well if you survived. Reni was a relic hunter of the Terran diaspora. She didn't believe in gods made of metal. She believed in thrust-to-weight ratios, reliable kinetic shielding, and getting paid on time. Currently, all three of those beliefs were being tested. Her ship, the Void Rat, was screaming through a dense cluster of nickel-iron asteroids, its proximity alarms blaring a constant, panic-inducing rhythm. Behind her, three sleek, purple interceptors of the Cult of the Broken Void were closing fast, pouring plasma fire into the debris field. "They are gaining, Captain Silva," Zyler cried out from the co-pilot seat. Zyler was a high priest of the ZYXX, a tall, slender being with multifaceted eyes that were currently wide with terror. He had hired Reni to take him to the center of the graveyard, to find the legendary, celestial Spire. The cult believed the Spire was the weapon the gods used to prune the universe of unworthy life, and they intended to activate it and finish the job. Zyler believed it was a beacon of enlightenment. Reni just hoped it was worth the hazard pay. "I see them, Zyler. Stop praying to the dashboard and reroute power to the rear deflectors." Reni snapped, yanking the yoke to the left to avoid a spinning rock the size of a city bus. A plasma bolt grazed their hull, sending a shudder through the small ship. Ahead of them, looming out of the cosmic dust like a sleeping giant, was the Spire. To Zyler it was magnificent. It was a towering structure of inexplicable alloys, a massive central column surrounded by 6 petal-like arrays, all pointing towards a distant, empty point in space. It was silent, dark, and utterly imposing. It was the church he had studied his entire life. To Reni it looked vaguely familiar. It had the brutal, functional aesthetic of old Earth industrial design. It didn't look elegant, it looked sturdy, like something built by the lowest bidder but designed to survive a nuclear winter. "Behold," Zyler whispered, forgetting the pirates trying to vaporize them. "The Spear of Light. The instrument of divine judgment." "Looks more like a giant antenna to me," Reni muttered, lining up her approach vector. "Hold on. We're docking hard." The Void Rat slammed onto the rusted landing pad of the ancient station, magnetic clamps groaning as they seized metal that hadn't been touched in eons. The cult ships peeled off, unable to follow them through the dense debris field surrounding the station, but they began to circle, waiting. Reni and Zyler breached the airlock. The interior of the station was frozen, dark, and silent. Their suit lights cut through the vacuum, illuminating long corridors lined with thick bundles of cabling and heavy bulkhead doors. "The path of silence," Zyler intoned, his voice trembling over the comms. "Only the worthy may walk these halls without being struck down by the guardians." Reni stepped over a desiccated, unrecognizable corpse of some other alien treasure hunter in the hallway. "The guardians must be on break. Come on. The energy signature is coming from the central core." They moved deeper into the station. Zyler stopped at every junction to perform brief rituals of appeasement to the spirits in the walls. He saw divine sigils in the warning stripes on the floor. He saw sacred altars in the rusted storage lockers. Reni just saw conduit housings and fuse boxes. The architecture was painfully human, but on a scale that boggled the mind. Whoever built this didn't care about aesthetics. They cared about redundancy and power flow. They reached the central control room, the sanctum sanctorum, in Zyler's theology. It was a massive, circular chamber dominated by an enormous, dormant holographic emitter table in the center. Along the walls were rows of what looked like very uncomfortable workstations. "This is it," Zyler breathed, falling to his knees. "The throne of the architect. Captain Silva, you must not approach. Only a high priest with the correct harmonic resonance codes can attempt to interface with the divine mind." Reni ignored him. She walked up to the main console. It was covered in a thick layer of space dust. It wasn't made of psychic crystal or shimmering light. It was made of high-impact plastic and brushed aluminum. There was a keyboard. A physical keyboard with keys that went clack. "Zyler, get up," Reni said, her voice flat. "It's not a throne. It's a desk." She wiped the dust off the main screen. It was a thick slab of glass, scratched and worn. She pressed a large, slightly sticky button on the side that was labeled with a universal power symbol. For a moment nothing happened. Then, with a groan of ancient capacitors coming back to life, the screen flickered. Static danced across the display, followed by a boot-up sequence that scrolled too fast to read. Xyler gasped, shielding his eyes from the holy illumination. The screen stabilized. It wasn't incomprehensible alien glyphs. It wasn't a psychic vision of the galaxy's end. It was a login screen. In Portuguese. Sistema de Defesa Orbital, Setor Curitiba 7. Status. M. Espera. Bateria de Laser Principal. Carregada. Usuario. Senya. Reni stared at the screen for a long silent minute. She felt a strange mixture of profound disappointment and hysterical laughter bubbling up in her chest. Curitiba Sector 7, she whispered. You have got to be kidding me. What does it say, Captain? Xyler asked, trembling. Does the god demand a sacrifice? Does it speak the words of creation? No, Xyler, Reni sighed, leaning against the console. It says, Orbital Defense System Curitiba Sector 7. It's asking for a username and password. Xyler looked confused. A password? A divine incantation. Yeah, something like that. Reni looked around the console. Taped under the edge of the desk, yellowed and brittle with age, was a piece of paper. She carefully peeled it off. It read, Usuario, admin/senya, coxinha 123, neomuta senya de novo beto, seu idiota. Incredible, Reni muttered. The ultimate security of the ancients. A sticky note. She typed in the credentials. The keyboard clacked satisfyingly loud in the silent room. The screen flashed green. Bienvenido, admin. Cuidado com o café no teclado. The holographic table in the center of the room sprang to life. It didn't show a map of the galaxy or the secrets of the universe. It showed a wireframe schematic of the asteroid field around them, with the 3 cult ships marked as red hostile dots. The station wasn't a spear of light designed to end the universe. It was a planetary defense platform, one of thousands humanity had built during its first expansion phase to deflect rogue asteroids and vaporize space debris before it hit populated worlds. It was basically a giant, space-based bug zapper operated by bored municipal workers on the night shift. The spear awakens. Xyler cried, looking at the hologram. It sees the heretics. Captain, you must wield the divine power. Purge the unclean. Reni looked at the controls. There was a large joystick that looked like it had been ripped from an ancient arcade cabinet, and a big red button under a plastic safety cover labeled, Dispara Laser, Solo para uso autorizado o utilio extremo. Fire laser, only for authorized use or extreme boredom. The cult ships outside had realized something was happening. They began a strafing run on the station, their plasma bolts shaking the ancient structure. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Alright, Beto from 10 million years ago, Reni grabbed the joystick. Let's see if your tax dollars were well spent. She maneuvered the targeting reticle on the holographic display. The massive station groaned around them as ancient hydraulic systems fought off millennia of inertia to rotate the main cannon. Outside, the petal-like arrays began to glow with a menacing red light as capacitors the size of buildings discharged their stored energy. Reni lined up the 3 red dots. She flipped the safety cover on the big red button. For Curitiba, she said dryly and smashed the button. Tum. There was no sound in space, but the recoil of the main weapon vibrated through the hull plates and into their boots. From the tip of the central spire, a beam of coherent ruby-red light, kilometers wide, erupted into the void. It wasn't an elegant weapon of a more civilized age. It was a brute-force industrial laser designed to vaporize nickel-iron asteroids instantly. The beam hit the first cult ship. There was no explosion, no dramatic fireball. The ship simply ceased to exist, turned into a rapidly expanding cloud of ionized gas. The beam continued, sweeping across the second and third ships in a lazy arc. In less than 2 seconds the threat was gone. Reni released the button. The station hummed down. The screen flashed a new message. Alvos eliminados. Beyond trabalho. Hora do lancha. Targets eliminated. Good job. Snack time. Silence returned to the control room. Xyler was staring at the empty space on the holographic display, his entire worldview shattered and rebuilt in an instant. The power. Xyler whispered. It was absolute. Captain Silva, you are truly a chosen vessel of the ancients. You communed with the machine spirit and it obeyed. Reni patted the console affectionately. It's not a spirit, Xyler. It's just really good engineering and a terrible password policy. She looked around the sacred sanctum. She realized that the ancients weren't gods. They were people who ate fried snacks, forgot their passwords, complained about their co-workers named Beto, and built weapons of mass destruction just to keep their skies clear of rocks. And somehow, that was far more impressive to her than any mystical deity. "Come on, High Priest," Reni said, turning towards the airlock. "Let's get back to the ship. I think I saw a vending machine in the hallway on the way in. If we're lucky, the ancients left us some stale chips." As they walked back through the silent metal corridors, Zyler wasn't praying anymore. He was asking questions about voltage, capacitor recharge rates, and what a coccinea tasted like. The universe was less magical than he had thought, but it was suddenly a lot more interesting. Humanity hadn't left behind temples. They had left behind tools. And after 10 million years, the tools still worked. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. The gods are gone. But their password still worked. If you enjoyed this revelation of the divine municipal tech, hit that like button. Comment below. What ridiculous password do you think would survive for 1,000,000 years? Subscribe for the next story in the Relic Hunters saga. The Immortal Concierge. The system is standby. The shift is over.